Ivan McKee.
To ask the Scottish Government what its position is on direct freight routes to mainland Europe from Scottish ports.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish port sector is crucial for the economy, enabling exporters to establish strong and secure links to get their goods to market. Over 250,000 containers are moved annually through the port of Grangeworth, which I visited recently, and 100,000 through Greenock Ocean Terminal, along with many other communities and commodities moved from ports across Scotland. The Scottish Government is supportive of increasing direct freight services to Europe. As Cabinet Secretary for Transport, I have engaged with interested parties, and Transport Scotland officials continue to engage regularly with potential operators and Scotland's main ports.
From McKee.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Direct freight routes are critical for Scotland's export growth and our economic resilience, and they can also reduce our carbon footprint. Most countries take an active interest in developing international trade links. A recent example was Ireland, which worked with ports and the logistics sector to add additional routes to mainland Europe following Brexit. So I can ask what work the Scottish Government is doing with port operators and the sector to build this resilience to increase export routes for Scottish businesses.
Cabinet Secretary.
I would point out in answering that obviously for Ireland Brexit created opportunities. In Scotland Brexit did not create opportunities. However, that doesn't stop us continuing to develop our work, and ministers and officials are involved in regular discussions with port operators, freight forwarders and hauliers to explore whether Scottish exporters can benefit from a more direct and resilient routes to market. And the UK's exit from the EU has been hugely disruptive for our exports, but it has not altered the dynamic that any new service from Scotland to the continent would require to be operated on a commercial basis. The UK's subsidy control regulations ensure that international ferry services across the UK are operated on a commercial basis. And many exporters do move their goods through Scottish ports, and we continue to work with key stakeholders to explore whether there are opportunities to increase that further.
Thank you. I've got a couple of supplementaries. First, Jamie Green.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. There's been a lot of talk over the years of a passenger and freight service from Rosyth to Dunkirk. Now, DFDS seem to be the only player in town in that conversation, and they are very keen to develop that route. However, a number of obstacles seem to stand in their way, some of which revolves around port infrastructure and government support. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary should be willing to write to members to update us on any conversations that the Scottish Government have had with DFDS, the port operator, and of course our friends on the continent?
Cabinet Secretary.
So I have engaged directly with Douglas Chapman MP, who has been pursuing this issue, and there have been discussions with DFDS and indeed the relevant ports connected. But I also wrote to the UK Government, and I subsequently met with Lord Davis of Gower, the Parliamentary Under Secretary of State for Transport, on the 5th of February regarding the issue, and he confirmed that the UK Government is not in a position to financially support a new service from Rosyth, but he did highlight the competitive nature of the ferry sector, which I referred to, and they have to operate on a commercial basis from UK ports to destinations across Europe, and there is a risk of potential litigation should other operators consider such support to be a subsidy. But it doesn't stop us continuing to have our discussions and dialogue and try and be creative about what can be done.
And Paul Sweeney.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Does the Minister agree with me that the privatisation of Scotland's major ports in the early 1990s was a massive strategic mistake? And will she consider options to establish trust ports in the Firth of Clyde and the Firth of Forth?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, clearly there are a number of ports that still exist in terms of our harbours as trust ports, but I do recognise the problems that were created by privatisation in this sector in the 1990s. It then has led to the reliance on different private operators and investors and their capability to invest to make sure that there is a continuing good service from our harbours. And many of them do, but I know there are criticisms that in some circumstances they haven't. I hear what the member is saying, but I'm not in a position currently to make such a commitment, but I hear his request, but that's not currently the Government's position.